can you start by telling us your name, title, and institution?
Yeah, my name's Chris Baehr. I work on programmable non-viral delivery for CRISPR genome editing. I'm also the regulatory co-chair for the SCGE, and I work at the Innovative Genomics Institute here at UC Berkeley, where I work with Ross Wilson.
Can you provide a brief overview of your SCGE project and explain your role within the project?
Yeah, so our SCGE U19 is focused on CRISPR therapies for repeat expansion neurological diseases. And I'm leading the effort to build a programmable non-viral delivery platform for CRISPR RNP delivery, where we're taking the RNP, sort of decorating the surface with a variety of targeting ligands, delivery peptides, and shielding polymers. And the goal is to develop these surface programmable RNPs for local delivery to the brain for the treatment of Huntington's disease.
For ultra-rare indications or individualized therapies where traditional clinical trials are infeasible, how do you think trials can be designed to balance getting the therapy to patients quickly while still properly testing safety and efficacy?
Yeah, so for these ultra rare diseases, I think we really have to be realistic about that the standard randomized clinical trial model is often not possible, right? If there's only a handful of patients in the world, you may not be able to run, a traditional placebo-controlled trial with enough statistical power. But the key here is that there's often these individualized therapies. There's many aspects that are shared. So think about the editor, the delivery system, and in some cases, even the endpoints can be shared across patients. And if those shared components are relatively well characterized, then you can imagine sort of this platform trial model where each new patient-specific therapy can build on past success with a toolkit rather than starting from zero each time. And the FDA is also starting to accommodate this kind of approach through its plausible mechanism framework. The idea being that for certain individualized therapies, especially when the underlying disease biology is relatively well understood, evidence from a sort of shared platform may be able to support related patient specific versions of the same therapy. And a good example of this, where this may be heading, is the work from Kieran and Rebecca at Penn are doing for these urea cycle disorders, where rather than treating each patient as a separate one-off program, they're building these sort of umbrella style phase one, two trials where patients with related disorders can enroll sort of under this shared protocol. And again, the patients all share this similar biology. The delivery vectors are the same, but the guides and the editing design are individualized for each patient's specific variant. And that kind of structure could let the field move faster for these ultra rare patients while still collecting safety and efficacy data in a rigorous, systematic way. And looking ahead, I think these platform style trials could help turn this personalized genetic medicine from these sort of rare one off cases like we saw with baby KJ into a more systemic path for treating ultra rare diseases.
So, as more gene therapies are moving towards regulatory approval, there's concern that patients may have issues accessing and paying for these therapies. Can you briefly describe some of these potential barriers?
Yeah, so as more of these gene therapies are approved, I think one of the biggest access issues is that they don't really cleanly fit into the way our insurance system is currently built. So many gene therapies are designed as this sort of one-time treatment with a very large, upfront cost. But the benefits are going to unfold over, years and decades, right? And at the same time, most Americans are changing insurance, every 4 to 5 years. And so the insurer paying for the therapy today may not be the insurer that benefits later from these, fewer hospitalizations, no more, chronic medication, or this disability, related costs. And so the broader value is shared across, patients, families, the future insurers, and society broadly, right? But the immediate cost falls on sort of one payer at one moment in time. And that mismatch can create friction. And so even when the gene therapy is approved, patients may still face prior authorization delays, coverage uncertainty, or inconsistent access across, different insurers. And so in the end, I think the value proposition is that these therapies is relatively strong, right? And that the system is going to adapt. But there's going to be real growing pains as payers, manufacturers, and regulators figure out how to finance these, one-time treatments with a long tail of benefit. So the other major access issue I wanted to point out is that there can be physical access issues or clinical access issues. So many of these therapies require specialized centers, a highly trained team, complex logistics, and long-term follow-up as well. And so for each patient, access can be really complicated by the fact they need to be referred, travel to the right center. They might have to take off time from work or arrange childcare, and then they have to get monitored every so often, right? And that's especially important for rural patients or lower income patients, or patients who just don't live near one of these major academic medical centers.
What are some of your ideas for improving access to these therapies? For example, like what groups or organizations should be involved in these types of changes?
Yeah, so I think one solution is to build sort of better payment models around these therapies, right? So one way that manufacturers are exploring this is these outcome-based agreements, where payment is sort of tied to whether the therapy actually delivers a durable benefit. And so Luxturna is one example of this. They're one of the first in vivo gene therapies. And the manufacturer typically offers an outcomes-based agreement. So if the patient doesn't meet these preset functional endpoints at 30 months, the payer is actually issued a rebate. So it's kind of, the therapy works or your money back guaranteed, which is kind of a cool concept. Another approach being explored by manufacturers is an annuity style payment, where the cost of a one-time therapy is spread over several years, rather than being paid, all at once. And that can help reduce the immediate burden on insurers covering the patient at the time of treatment. But a challenge here is that with this approach, it's not necessarily portable. And so these payment plans are often negotiated insurer by insurer. And so there's no simple system for what happens if a patient, changes insurance midstream, right? So before the payments or follow-up period is complete. And this is where standardized agreements or model contracts could help by creating, sort of clear rules of the road. And I think regulatory players can have a role here as well. The other major access issue is getting patients to these specialized facilities, like I mentioned earlier. A promising solution for this is a more hub and spoke model. So specialized centers can perform the highest risk procedures, and then you can have a local care team help with like pre-treatment workup and long-term monitoring. Another facet I'm relatively hopeful for here is that as therapies move towards simpler in vivo delivery, you think in vivo CAR T, something like this, right? Some of these barriers may become less limiting.
In the next 10 years, what is something that you predict or hope will happen in the gene therapy field?
Yeah, so if you don't mind, I want to break this into sort of three levels of confidence. Okay, so I have a high confidence prediction, a medium confidence prediction, and a low confidence, sort of aggressive prediction, if that's okay. So I'll give you my high confidence prediction first. I think in the next decade, we're going to see our first in vivo genome editing medicines used in sort of a large patient population. So the clearest early examples might be these liver-directed programs, where delivery is relatively mature, the biology is well understood. We have like clear biomarkers like LDL reduction, and they're relatively easy to track as well, right? You can think of PCSK9 editing for cardiovascular disease as sort of the poster child here. The question I have is whether other indications will see approval in the next 10 years as well. And so for the medium term prediction, I think we could start seeing something closer to real genetic surgery. And by that, I mean a care team looks at a patient with a defined genetic disorder, selects a vector, selects an editor, maybe designs a guide or a targeting strategy, and then treats the patient within a repeatable clinical or regulatory framework. I'm not sure this is going to be routine everywhere in 10 years, but I can imagine this capability beginning to disseminate across major US research hospitals for certain classes of genetic disorders, where you see a few standardized toolkits that specialized centers use repeatedly. Okay, and then finally, my low confidence prediction, or maybe hope, is that we'll have safe and efficient delivery vectors for many of the disease relevant cells and tissues in the body. So right now, delivery is still a huge bottleneck for genome editing. We can edit some tissues reasonably well, especially the liver, like we talked about earlier. But there's still limited places. We're still limited in certain places like the CNS, lung, muscle, and other difficult to reach organs. And so the field can unlock sort of these reliable delivery in those tissues. I think we can really start thinking about genetic medicine as a therapeutic option for whole categories of genetic disease.